Lucy Letby was wrong. It wasn't a gang of 4, it was 7.
Those are the words of Lucy Letby accusing consultant Dr John Gibbs, apparently on a high in the immediate aftermath of the conviction. Of course, Dr Gibbs has himself been accused of severe, egregious and repeated medical negligence himself at this point.
This was likely a preventable death.
Some are revisiting this statement by Dr Gibbs.
Lucy Letby was wrong. It wasn't a gang of 4, it was 7.
And now seeing this statement as an example of brazen arrogance, as if he can divulge details of a conspiracy in plain sight and also expect to get away with it. I think he's socially awkwardly trying to make a point and trying to be persuasive. I've talked about this in another recent video, that the point is presumably there's no smoke without fire, and it's unlikely 7 would point the finger at 1 without legitimate grievance. It is unlikely that 7 would point the finger at 1 in bad faith, but then it's rare to find a case as controversial as the Lucy Letby case. I've gone through the statements in other videos where the number of consultants pointing the finger are outnumbered by the number of junior doctors and nurses with great doubts or no suspicions. So in this video, I'm going to look at how the accusations against Lucy Letby evolved from the starting point. One explanation for what happened is that Lucy Letby is a particularly cunning and devious killer who tricked almost everyone until the consultant slowly cottoned on to her. An alternative explanation is that she was the victim of a conspiracy perpetrated by 7 devious hospital consultants who conspired against her to cover for their own failings and incompetence. A further alternative is that within the gang of 7 consultants, there were a couple of ringleaders who brainwashed the other consultants or potentially fabricated details about the accused's behaviour. The earliest trace of the accusations against Lucy Letby date back to a staff meeting around July 2nd, 2015. The story goes that neonatal unit manager Arian Powell would suggest to Dr Stephen Brearey that Lucy Letby was the only member of staff who had been on shift for 3 deaths. Dr Stephen Brearey claims he would respond by saying this.
Well, I think I can remember saying, "Oh no, it can't be Lucy, not nice Lucy."
However, this is disputed by testimony from Arian Powell. At one point during a staffing analysis, Arian Powell would point out to Dr Brearey that another nurse, Mel Taylor, would be prominently correlated to negative incidents on the unit. Dr Brearey would give a frivolous response, saying, quote, "But Mel is nice," close quote. She then suggests that the stress of the allegations against Lucy Letby could lead her to kill herself, to which Dr Brearey allegedly said, "I don't care." Stephen Brearey is a controversial figure within the Lucy Letby story. In her book Unmasking Lucy Letby, BBC journalist Judith Moritz describes meeting Dr Brearey and Ravi Jayaram, saying, quote, "We first met Steve Brearey and Ravi Jayaram in a hotel on the outskirts of Chester. Later, quote, it was impossible to meet Steve Brearey and not feel convinced that this was a man of integrity, driven by conscience and the truth." On a later page, Judith Moritz says, Ravi Jayaram and Steve were kind of a double act. She goes on to describe Ravi Jayaram as a Z-list celebrity, but says of Dr Brearey, quote, "Steve was different. The man seemed to be without ego." However, other characterizations depict Dr Brearey as something of a workplace bully and a workplace troll. For instance, at the Thirlwall Inquiry, it was put to risk midwife Anne-Marie Lawrence, "What was your relationship with Dr Brearey?" She responds, "It was a difficult relationship, I will be honest. Every communication I had with him felt it was more difficult than it was needed to be, and I didn't understand why at the time." In another example, the aforementioned source, Arian Powell, talks of a workplace culture in which it was considered acceptable for senior consultants to shout and even scream at more junior staff. Quote, I mean, we were lucky with our consultants in certain respects, but they did have their moments where they were allowed to scream and shout at the staff, and it was accepted as well. That's fine. He's a consultant. Close quote. Connecting the dots, the risk midwife Anne-Marie Lawrence gives an indication of who the consultants with a disrespectful communication style were. That said, it's not necessarily clear if that's in ways such as being profane, or if they are the individuals shouting and screaming. It's put to her, quote, "You say there was definitely a hierarchy and some consultants were more respectful than others," close quote. After some reluctance, she eventually says, quote, "Some of our less respectful consultants were definitely Mr. Brearey and Mr. Jayaram, although less often with Mr. Jayaram." The next source on Dr. Brearey comes from a nurse called Hayley Griffiths. This clip comes from the Daily Mail podcast and relates to text messages which were apparently shown on a big screen during the Thirlwall Inquiry.
In other text messages Hayley Griffiths sent to Lucy Letby, she described Dr. Brearey as a grade A knobhead and claimed she wanted to punch RJ.
The next source on Dr. Brearey comes from former medical director Ian Harvey, albeit relayed in quite an unusual way. At the Thirlwall Inquiry, Dr. Brearey would say Ian Harvey had warned him, quote, "He was saying that I ought to be very, very careful, that his office was a funnel, a receptacle of information from lots of different areas, including the neonatal unit, and yes, that I should be very careful," close quote. Something that I think is notable at this stage is there have been clear errors by the treating doctors and obvious failures in diligence, which make you wonder why Dr. Brearey would have made such a fuss out of Lucy Letby's presence. In the case of baby C, Dr. Gibbs was eventually forced to admit at the criminal trial that he didn't examine the baby for the first 3 days of life, despite knowing the baby was high risk. In the case of baby D, the consultants have been heavily criticised for failure to adhere to an antibiotic treatment guideline for a premature baby.
There is a standard treatment guideline in this country and in other countries.
The treatment guideline includes the prescription of antibiotics for mother and then baby, which in this case wouldn't happen for over 24 hours.
If there is prolonged premature rupture of membranes, the mother should be given antibiotics right away so that the baby can be protected from any infection.
Referring back to the timeline and sequence of events, Ravi Jayaram would say to the Thirlwall Inquiry, quote, "When I returned to work in early November 2015 and became aware of the death of child I and the repeated associated presence of Letby, I became concerned for the first time that Letby could somehow be causing inadvertent or even deliberate harm." He goes on to say, quote, "I recall there were several informal corridor conversations between consultants at this time. I cannot recall who amongst us was the first to articulate the possibility of Letby causing inadvertent or deliberate harm, but when expressed openly, it became clear that I was not the only consultant with these concerns." Dr. Gibbs was quite evasive by his own admission throughout his testimony at the Thirlwall Inquiry. He would tell the inquiry this, of when his suspicions first started, quote, "I can't remember exactly when I became concerned something unusual, not natural, might be happening on the unit. Maybe the end of 2015 or early 2016. Dr. Elizabeth Newby was a consultant at the hospital who would leave midway through the indictment period in February 2016. She would tell the inquiry that she was approached about Lucy Letby by Dr. Gibbs, Dr. Brearey and Dr. Jayaram after the death of child I in October 2015. Inquiry counsel would put it to her, quote, "Now you tell us at paragraph 54 that you recorded a discussion with Dr. Gibbs plus Dr. Brearey and or Dr. Jayaram." They then quote from her statement, which says, "Following my involvement with the collapse of child I in October 2015, which she acknowledged." So at this point in time, depending on your perspective, you could say there is a gang of three, either with concerns about Lucy Letby or talking about her behind her back. From looking at the statements of the other described gang of 7 consultants, none of the others appear to be in the loop at this point in time. The next significant event in the timeline will take place on the 8th of February 2016. A thematic review will be called to identify common themes in some of the cases. The review will focus on 11 cases. 5 of them will end up on the indictment. 6 of the cases will be non-indictment babies. Ward Manager Arian Powell will prepare a staffing analysis for this meeting. Part of this staffing analysis will show a correlation between Lucy Letby and a number of negative incidents. However, it should be noted that at various points, Arian Powell's staffing analysis would also show correlations with Dr. Gibbs and Dr. Harkness. Dr. Brearey will receive this staffing analysis and remove the doctors from the version he would present at the thematic review. You can see the names of the attendees of the thematic review in the bottom left-hand corner here. I've underlined Nim Subadar, if I'm pronouncing that name right, as he was the main neonatal expert at the review. If you go by Dr. Subadar's account of this meeting, it was a superficial assessment of the cases where no common theme was identified, but there were potential instances of suboptimal care identified. Dr. Brearey has given several different accounts of what would take place at this meeting. Looking at these quotes from a Guardian article linked in the description, 8th February 2016, a thematic review ordered by Brearey finds several common links in 9 unusual deaths since June 2015. Letby's connection to the mortalities is mentioned at a meeting called to discuss the report, which was sent to the medical director, Ian Harvey. Brearey requests an urgent meeting with executives, but no meeting takes place until May 2016, the court is told. So you can see this reference to statements Dr. Brearey made under oath. Presumably, the source is either the trial or Dr. Brearey himself, or a bit of both. Whereas if you go by Dr. Subadar's recollection of that meeting, also under oath, he says, quote, "I don't remember any discussions about staffing at that meeting," close quote. The next significant event in the timeline will occur, I think, in April 2016, when Lucy Letby is moved from night shifts to day shifts. Arian Powell was asked about this at the Thirlwall Inquiry. Inquiry counsel put it to her, quote, "We know that you moved Letby to day shifts in April 2016. Can you tell us why?" She responds, quote, "I guess it goes back to discussions with the 2 Yvonnes, that maybe this was an opportune moment to put Lucy onto days as a well-being approach because she had been involved in so many of the recent deaths, that must have a profound effect on her well-being." So the evidence from the Thirlwall Inquiry suggests that Lucy Letby is moved from night shifts to day shifts by the nursing body who support her, as Yvonne Griffiths and Yvonne Farmer, who orchestrated this along with Arian Powell, would all be considered part of the nursing body. However, it is notable that in the wake of the conviction, a revisionist narrative would start by the consultants, such as Ravi Jayaram, implying they were sounding the alarm much more forcefully than any evidence suggests they were at this stage.
You know, for example, one of them said, "Oh, well, we weren't loud enough in expressing our concerns. How much louder could we be?"
I'm not aware that Ravi Jayaram has taken credit for the specific act of moving Lucy Letby from night shifts to day shifts. However, it is notable that he will later claim to have interrupted Lucy Letby in the process of attempting to murder baby K on February 17th, 2016. So far at this point in April 2016, there's no evidence he has said anything about it to anyone, and certainly not to his bosses. It has been said that when Lucy Letby moved from night shifts to day shifts, the deaths followed her. However, it's worth pointing out this is now in April 2016. The most recent death for which Lucy Letby will be charged occurred in October 2015. The most recent death on the unit as a whole occurred in March 2016, when Lucy Letby was not on duty. So it only makes sense to say the deaths followed Lucy Letby if you do a subjective statistical analysis, and further, the moving of her to day shifts has not been immediately prompted by a death on her shift. The next escalation occurs on 4th of May 2016. It's not clear what exactly prompts it. Dr Brearey emails the nursing director for the whole hospital saying, quote, "There is a nurse on the unit who has been present for quite a few deaths and other arrests. Arian has sensibly put her on day shifts only at the moment, but can't do this indefinitely. It would be very helpful to meet before she is due to go back on night shifts. There is some pressure regarding staffing numbers with this at the moment." Close quote. The Director of Nursing will then hold a meeting with Dr Brearey. Looking at testimony from the Thirlwall Inquiry, it's put to her by Inquiry Counsel, quote, "You had a meeting on 11th of May 2016 which included Dr Brearey. Is that right?" Alison Kelly responds, "That's correct, yes." It's then put to her, "He attended that meeting in his capacity as a consultant paediatrician and the lead for the neonatal unit, is that right?" Alison Kelly responds, "That's correct." Inquiry Counsel say, "He was concerned about the increase in neonatal mortality, is that right?" She responds, "That's correct." Among the things said by Dr Brearey at that meeting was that he had a concern that Letby may be the cause of that increase. Is that correct? Alison Kelly responds, "We discussed at length the detail of the thematic review that he had undertaken with a number of colleagues, including external stakeholders, in addition to Arian Powell's points that she had brought to that meeting. He never at that meeting talked about deliberate harm, but he was worried about the increase in mortality." The next significant event, which I'm going to focus on, occurs on 23rd of June 2016. Baby O will collapse and die unexpectedly. The prosecution case is that Lucy Letby punched the baby and forced air down the stomach. However, as is fairly well known now, other experts have criticised Dr Brearey for a reckless and misplaced needle insertion.
A needle was blindly inserted into the abdomen to try and relieve the abdominal distension. Well, this is something you don't do, and you don't do blindly.
The needle perforated the liver. The baby was still being ventilated with a needle in the liver. The liver was now being lacerated.
So at this point, there is a theory that Dr Brearey needed to cover up for his own incompetence, and regardless of that, things will escalate quickly from here. The basis for the idea that Dr Brearey needed to cover up for his own incompetence comes from an interview with Deputy Ward Manager Yvonne Griffiths. She would say in an interview during Lucy Letby's grievance complaint that she took out accusing the consultants of bullying, but quote, "I think they were frightened she, as in Lucy Letby, would go to the police herself. Personally, I tend to think things were probably more confused and chaotic rather than calculated at this point." The following morning, on Friday 24th of June 2016, Ravi Jayaram would escalate matters. He would meet Karen Townsend, the Director for Urgent Care, at a more administrative and non-clinical level in a coffee shop. There, Ravi Jayaram would share with her for the first time his theory that Lucy Letby may have been harming babies. It's not clear what exactly prompted this on this day, but considering that he shared an office with Stephen Brearey, if Dr Brearey was raging after the collapse of baby O, this might have influenced Dr Jayaram. Karen Townsend would then go and seek out Karen Reeves, the head of the nursing wing of the urgent care division. Meanwhile, whilst this was happening, Back on the neonatal unit, Lucy Letby, Dr Gibbs, and an anonymous female doctor called Dr V would be looking after baby O's twin, baby P, who would be in a bad way. Baby P would tragically pass away on the 24th of June 2016. If you go by the Court of Appeal decision, as it stands, this was because Lucy Letby had squirted air down the nasogastric tube. If you go by Dr. Shu Lee's panel of experts, it's their opinion that, quote, there were unacceptable delays in the recognition and treatment of the pneumothorax, close quote. They also describe a number of counterproductive treatment interventions at the direction of the treating consultants, which would have explained the baby's collapse and death. What would happen next is disputed. Skimming through Dr. Brearey's Thirlwall Inquiry testimony, it's put to him, quote, you do remember speaking with Karen Rees on the evening of 24th of June 2016. Dr. Brearey responds, I realised that's who I was talking to, close quote. Dr. Brearey, in a TV interview, would claim that Karen Rees would rebuke his attempts to take Lucy Letby off the unit.
I challenged her. I said, well, are you saying that you're making this decision against the wishes of 7 consultant paediatricians?
So Dr. Brearey is claiming there are 7 consultants against Lucy Letby on the 24th of June 2016. If you look next to Dr. Saladi's testimony from the Thirlwall Inquiry, Dr. Saladi, by the way, is one of the 7 consultants who eventually sign on to call for a police investigation. Inquiry counsel put it to Dr. Saladi, quote, Dr. Saladi, I'm going to move forward to the meeting that you have mentioned a number of times now, which is on the 27th of June 2016. You have told us already that that meeting caused you 2 sleepless nights before you then sent an email on the 29th of June. Dr. Saladi responds, quote, I already knew that we had increased mortality. That was the first time that I realised that there was one member of staff who was associated with that meeting, close quote. So in other words, he doesn't become aware of the movement against Lucy Letby until 27th of June 2016, 3 days after Dr. Brearey would claim all 7 consultants were on board. Karen Rees would also more directly contradict some of Dr. Brearey's claims in that interview.
At no point did I say I would take responsibility for any further incidents on a neonatal unit. Why would I?
So it's really at a consultant meeting on the 27th of June 2016 that the Gang of 7 takes shape. Dr. Saladi is the final member to be recruited. Dr. Elizabeth Newby has left for a different hospital and has been replaced by Dr. Susie Holt, who also joins the faction. Dr. Brearey and Dr. Jayaram appear to be the 2 main ringleaders. Dr. Brearey would also claim at the 27th of June meeting that his support would include the nursing body and junior doctors, which seems to be a common and, in my opinion, manipulative theme from him, that he misrepresents others' opinions as being something more favourable to him. There is evidence of this if you look at this email on the 27th of June from Medical Director Ian Harvey to Nursing Director Alison Kelly, quote, Steve claiming that all in the meeting, including Arian and Anne Murphy, agreed nurse be excluded from patient contact. 180 degrees about face from them. If that's the case, do you want to check? Close quote. If you go to Ward Manager Arian Powell's Thirlwall Inquiry testimony, she says in reference to the 27th of June meeting, quote, the consultants wrote a letter to say that we collectively all think that Letby was responsible, when in actual fact we weren't consulted about that letter, close quote. Dr. Saladi has said he would have 2 sleepless nights after the meeting on the 27th of June. He would then send an email on the 29th of June questioning whether the consultants should refer themselves for external investigation, as there is a possibility it may backfire. On the 30th of June 2016, Lucy Letby would work her final shift on the neonatal unit, as it would turn out. She would then go on annual leave. The same day, 7 days after the collapse of baby O, the chief executive, Tony Chambers, would meet the gang of 7 paediatricians and tell them that the neonatal unit was being downgraded so as not to take such high-risk babies. Although the official date on the press release would be 7th July, also on the 30th of June 2016, Ravi Jayaram would email to the other members of the Gang of 7 the now semi-famous paper, quote, "Pulmonary vascular air embolism in the newborn," close quote. This is the semi-famous paper by Dr. Shu Lee that describes the symptoms of an air embolism. Dr. Gibbs would respond to the email saying, quote, "This mechanism of air emboli does not seem to apply to our run of neonatal collapses/deaths," close quote. Despite Dr. Gibbs knowing that the cause and effect were wrong, as would later be described by Dr. Shu Lee himself. In a highly devious move, in my opinion, he would play along with the air embolism theory at the criminal trial and at the Thirlwall Inquiry. Through early July, there would be several meetings between the consultants and executives. Throwing their weight around, the consultants would eventually get their wish of blocking Lucy Letby's return to the neonatal unit when she came back from annual leave on the 14th of July 2016. As part of her grievance investigation, interviewed Deputy Ward Manager Yvonne Griffiths would say this of this decision, quote, "We partly did it for protection for Lucy and partly to pacify those casting aspersions," close quote. The consultants and executives would have several meetings throughout the month of July. The hospital executives would then decide to invite a review team from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health to assess their neonatal services. The representatives from the RCPCH would begin their review in September 2016, around 3 months after the death of baby O. During the review, the Gang of 7 consultants would wargame Lucy Letby. To understand this phrase, I think it's easiest to refer to the Thirlwall Inquiry testimony. Inquiry counsel would put it to the invited reviewer, quote, "Then there is a discussion at lunchtime. Do you know what the phrase wargaming means?" The invited reviewer would respond, "I know what I think." Inquiry counsel would then say, "Yes, well, I want to make sure we are on the same page, so an unusual phrase." The invited reviewer would respond, "Would you explain it from your perspective?" Inquiry counsel would then say, "Yes, of course, it is the notion, and it's often used in the context of military medicine because of the overlap of where doctors, military doctors, come together and they come up with scenarios." So if you haven't already guessed, you're going to see the consultants speculate on scenarios by which Lucy Letby may have been harming babies. One perspective is that the consultants may have been doing this out of genuine concern, and of course each consultant has a different perspective and experience. A more cynical view of the consultants is that they are going to abuse their positions of influence by making allegations that are hard to rebuke and disprove, such as an allegation of an air attack. Perhaps if the consultants are all on the same page and they have got their stories straight, that will give them the confidence to take on such a grave allegation. If you look at these written notes from a meeting the consultants had with the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health reviewers, you can see some of the speculation the consultants made. INS is repeated twice, which is short for irrelevant and sensitive, and apparently refers to 2 chemicals which the consultants were speculating that Lucy Letby may have been using. They also suggest insulin injection or air embolism. If you go through all the meeting notes from the Thirlwall Inquiry, you can see on several occasions the consultants make this type of speculation about Lucy Letby. However, not all the speculation took place in meetings. Much of it took place in hushed corridor conversations. This is how nursing manager Karen Rees would describe it.
It was a little bit cloak and dagger.
The report from the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health would come back in the middle of October. It would criticise the culture of teamwork and leadership, and partly would clear Lucy Letby, but would also call for a detailed case note review of the deaths on the unit. So the hospital would commission an external neonatologist, Dr. Jane Horden, to carry out a review of the deaths. Meanwhile, Lucy Letby, still working in the Risk and Patient Safety Office, would take out a grievance against the consultants. The hospital would use Head of Pharmacy Dr. Chris Green to investigate the grievance. After the conclusion of the grievance process, Dr. Green would warn hospital executives not to trust the two ringleaders of the movement against Lucy Letby, Dr Brearey and Ravi Jayaram. Specifically, it can be seen in meeting notes at the end of the grievance process. Dr. Green says, quote, "I was disgusted by their behaviour. It is likely that they lied," close quote. A short time later, Dr. Horden's review would come back, which had found suboptimal care in 13 out of 17 cases, with another 4 classified as unexplained. Taking the combination of the RCPCH review, which had criticised teamwork and culture, the Horden review, which had criticised clinical practice, and Dr. Green's review, which had criticised the integrity of the consultant body, the executives would call the consultants to a meeting on the 26th of January 2017. At the meeting, the executives Tony Chambers and Ian Harvey would give the consultants a talking to, and nursing manager Karen Rees would read out a statement which would attempt to humanise Lucy Letby, putting across the point that it is stressful to be the subject of heinous allegations. Ravi Jayaram has told New Yorker writer Rachel Aviv that he, quote, "came out of that meeting really angry," close quote. Ravi Jayaram would then start to arm up legally himself, exploring his rights with the British Medical Association and Medical Defence Union. On the 15th of March 2017, with Lucy Letby on the brink of returning to work on the neonatal unit, Ravi Jayaram would have a meeting with a member of Human Resources called Sue Hodgkinson. At that meeting, 13 months after the death of baby Kay, Ravi Jayaram would for the first time describe his theory that he thought Lucy Letby had dislodged the tube of this baby. The hospital executives would now reconsider the possibility of there being a police investigation. However, just 12 days later, Dr. Jayaram would be reluctant to get the police involved. At a staff meeting on the 27th of March, he would say of the police investigation, quote, "For me personally, I have a vague media profile, recognise the impact, but so be it, it's for the greater good," close quote. Yet in an email on the 4th of May, about a month later, he is much more confident. He talks of, quote, "for the police to have their interest piqued," close quote. You may wonder what would have changed over the course of that month. I wonder if the consultants would be more confident that they collectively had got their stories straight. This 4th of May email is also highly significant because in it, Dr. Jayaram gives a different description of the baby K incident to the one he would give at trial. The surfacing of the 4th of May email after the trials of Lucy Letby is significant because it went to all 7 consultants, meaning they were aware that Ravi Jayaram's testimony in court is a contradiction of his earlier communication, which implicates potentially all of them in a conspiracy. 11 days after the 4th of May email, Ravi Jayaram would meet Paul Hughes of Operation Hummingbird, who would decide to investigate, and at this point I'm going to suspend this timeline. So in conclusion, the Thirlwall Inquiry was called based off the medical evidence at the Lucy Letby trial which convicted her. Since the trial, that evidence has been demolished by Dr. Shu Lee and his international panel of experts. Putting the evidence of medical negligence uncovered by Dr. Shu Lee into context with other evidence uncovered by the Thirlwall Inquiry, there is grounds, in my opinion, to investigate the consultant body at Lucy Letby's former hospital for perjury and/or obstructing the course of justice.